Gyrfalcons Hauberk was returned back into the sandbox after recently being disabled. Pairing this thing with Collective Obligation, which was quite literally made for Void builds, gives you a 100% roaming uptime on the Gyrfalcons buff, and it allows you to clear hordes of ads with volatile rounds, remain completely invincible with Devour, and even debuff enemies with weaken effects. Yo, what's going on guys? It's GMiners here, and in this video we have a top tier hunter build which is aimed at ad clearing, survivability, and high burst damage. I've seen a bunch of other people combining these two exotics, so I wanted to give it my own spin on this build, and it's safe to say that we have almost every benefit of a Void build you would ever need. We have Devour, Weaken, Invis, and even volatile rounds, while also having our own permanent buff, which is amongst the largest in the entire game. A lot of the builds in this game don't always have the greatest synergies, but when it comes to Void, I think the synergies are actually by far the best, and this setup is no exception. Just by throwing a single grenade and getting a kill, we're going to get the ball rolling by proccing volatile rounds, and then since this does trigger Gyrfalcons, all we need to do is keep shooting. This will constantly make us invis, and then when we come out of invis, this is where we get that massive 35% increase in damage. The best part is that with Collective Obligation, we can also leech the Void effects that we use, so we're able to constantly reapply volatile and weaken effects to enemies, which makes our Gyrfalcon cycle last even longer. Devour also has a part to play in giving us huge chunks of grenade energy back on kill, and obviously keeping us alive, but then it also helps prevent the need to ever reload with Collective Obligation so that we can constantly fire at enemies. Real quick, before we do get into how any of this setup works, if you guys do like this video or it helps you out in any way, make sure to drop a like and sub down below. Subbing is 100% free, it helps me out a ton, and you can always unsub later. Starting off with the build, I am running Deadfall. This helps a ton with ad clear, which is the main purpose of the build, and it also happens to have the shortest cooldown. Gambler's Dodge is going to help give us our melee back whenever dodging near an enemy, and then the reason that this is important is because our Snare Bomb is going to allow us to apply weaken effects to enemies. Since this build does work around Void debuffs, this is another way to keep that cycle going and reapply this effect. Lastly, I am on Vortex Grenade, which is going to eventually apply weaken and then also give us volatile rounds. Grenades that insta-kill, like Scatter, are going to be great, but it ends up being hard to get the weaken effect to leech when using this, so Vortex tends to be the easiest to use. For our very first aspect, we have Stylish Execution, which is the centerpiece to getting this build to work. With this, anytime we defeat a weakened, suppressed, or a volatile target, we gain invisibility and true sight, which means as long as we are constantly shooting volatile rounds or weakening rounds with Collective Obligation, we're going to keep popping in and out of invis, which will just repeatedly proc the 35% weapon buff from our exotic chest piece. With this build, I do also have Vanishing Step. This just very simply allows our dodge to also make us invisible. I like having this as an easier way to proc invis in case the cycle we have with the build ever ends and I just need to quickly get the buff back. This does also give us 2 fragment slots for a total of 4, which helps make the build even stronger. First up for our fragments is going to be Echo of Undermining. This gives our Void grenades the weaken effect, which is also going to apply a 15% debuff to enemies anytime they take damage from one of our grenades. Echo of Starvation is going to give us Devour anytime we grab an Orb of Power. With this build, we will be spawning orbs in ourself, and the nice part is these will add time to the Devour timer if we pick any extras up. For anyone who doesn't know, Devour will return full health and shields on kill for every single kill we get, which is extremely broken, and then it also gives a percentage of grenade energy back per kill depending on the enemy we kill. So tankier enemies will obviously give more grenade energy back. Echo of Instability is going to give our Void weapons volatile rounds whenever we get a grenade kill. These rounds will apply the volatile effect, which ends up sticking to an enemy and explodes, dealing damage to them and enemies nearby. To actually proc this explosion, once it's stuck onto the enemy, we just need to do a bit of damage, and then we can keep reapplying this every time we shoot. Lastly, we do have Echo of Persistence, which is going to give us a longer duration for Invis and Devour. This is mostly for Devour, since we don't want to be staying invis for a long time, but the added invis duration does end up helping in one-off situations where you might need to hide or recover health. Taking a look over at Gyrfalcons Hauberk, with this exotic equipped, anytime we come out of invis, we get a 6-second long damage buff. This only applies for our weapons and is a 35% increase in total, and this is the only major thing we will be using this exotic for. Since stylish execution will allow us to repeatedly proc invis, this means we are constantly getting this buff applied to our weapons. The second part of this cycle is going to be the exotic pulse rifle collective obligation. This leeches the void debuffs that we apply to enemies, which for us will be volatile and weaken. And then with these leeched, we can then hold our reload button to now fire these debuffs back at enemies, which will constantly count as killing a debuffed target. Meaning stylish execution procs, we end up going invis, instantly come out, and we now have a 35% buff just to do it all over again a few seconds later. Devour and Invis will also proc the Umbral Sustenance perk that Collective Obligation has, so this is going to be how we are constantly bypassing reloads while this is equipped. For the mods on this build, the main thing we want to do is have Font of Might procced constantly. So first and foremost, we have Reaping WELLMAKER. Since we dodge a lot with this build, this will constantly spawn in Void Elemental Wells, and then we are also running Elemental Ordnance to also spawn these on grenade kills. Lastly, I have one copy of Font of Might, which is an additional 25% weapon damage boost to void weapons with our setup, which is great when using something like Taipan. Other than that, I do usually run Powerful Friends with my Hunter builds for the increase in mobility, and also crucial to the build is going to be Harmonic Siphon. This will spawn in Orbs of Power when getting multi-kills with weapons that match our subclass type, so now anytime we get a double kill with Collective Obligation, we can gain Devour. This is actually one of the most fun builds I've used on Hunter in a while. The only reason I didn't take it up against champions in this video was there wasn't any good unstopped champ activities when getting this gameplay. Otherwise, it should be really easy to take this into mastered content using Collective Obligation against unstops and some other special weapons for the other champion type. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this build in the comments below, and the dim link, as always, will be in my Discord server for anyone interested. I do also stream a bunch over on Twitch, where we end up doing lowmans and speedruns live. A link to that is in my description below, along with the Discord server. Anyways, that's all for this video, guys. As always, have a good one. Peace.